The United Nations agencies and the African Union Commission have called for urgent action to end a food security crisis in Africa. According to a joint report released during the UN's Climate Change Conference in Dubai, hundreds of millions of people across the continent, many young children, face the prospect of more hunger and malnutrition in 2024. Jane Keogh has more.
Africa's young population is set to double by 2050. Ensuring they have access to nutritious food to maintain their development is a priority for many leaders and organizations on the continent. However, it's much easier said than done. Several factors are hindering Africa's efforts to meet the food security and nutrition targets of the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. These include factors that are within their control, such as internal conflicts, but many which they cannot influence, such as climate change, the COVID-19 pandemic, and external conflicts. The fighting between Russia and Ukraine, countries which are major suppliers of wheat to Africa, has brought huge challenges. The Food and Agriculture Organization, the UN Economic Commission for Africa, the World Food Programme, and the African Union Commission have released a joint report highlighting alarming statistics on food insecurity and malnutrition in the continent. According to the findings, in 2022, nearly 282 million people in Africa were undernourished, an increase of 57 million people since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. An estimated 868 million people were moderately or severely food insecure in the same year, with more than two-thirds of this population being from Central, Eastern, and Western Africa. Among those affected the most are children under the age of 5, where 30% of them are stunted because of malnutrition. The agencies say they hope these findings will trigger new momentum for agri-food systems transformation in Africa. Jane Keogh, CGTN.
Well, we are joined by Abebe Hale Gabriel, Assistant Director General and Regional Representative for Africa, FAO. Welcome to the program. He is based in Accra. Abebe, the report says that Africa is facing a food crisis of unprecedented proportions. How bad is the situation, and what else does the report say?
Thank you. The situation is unfortunately pretty bad. Talking about more than 860 million people food insecure in Africa, it tells a lot. When we talk about food insecurity, it means this huge proportion of the population do not have food available. They face challenges of accessibility, but also affordability. And we're dealing with a significant majority of the population, a factor that affects the majority of the population. It's pretty bad. If you look at the nutrition aspect, we're talking about 20%, about 20% of the population undernourished. And it will have implication on the health aspect besides the food security aspect. And what matters even worse, what makes it even worse is that about 78% of these people are unable to afford a healthy diet. So it's also linked with the level of income they receive. And when we are talking about hundreds of millions of people and the trend is increasing, it's a major source of concern. So the situation is pretty bad.
Well, a major source of concern indeed. You mentioned a huge proportion of the population is at risk. My question to you, if you can elaborate, what are the major contributing factors? I know you mentioned the low level of income, but what other factors are contributing to this food crisis in Africa?
In the report, we have outlined what we call the drivers of food insecurity and malnutrition. They are intertwined. Some of them are natural caused, others are man-made. For example, droughts and floods are frequent phenomena in many parts of the continent. These are climate-induced, but also conflicts and instability has been affecting a number of countries across the continent. This will have destabilizing impacts on the communities, on the population, making it difficult for them to engage in the production and trade and consumption activities. Also have the challenge of transboundary diseases, plant pests and diseases. The issue on the one hand is the excessive vulnerability of African production and livelihood systems to these kinds of shocks. On the other hand, the capacity of our systems and institutions to adequately respond to these shocks is very, very weak. So it's overlapping crisis, but also the capacity of the systems, the institutions, the capacity are weak.
Mr. Abebe, I guess the final question to be asked is, how does Africa deal with this particular crisis, and what are organizations like yours doing to help?
There have been a lot of efforts by many countries to reverse this situation. It's not easy, but I think the most fundamental issue is to deal with the structural issues. You know, agricultural productivity in Africa is very, very low. Trade is very much limited. Value addition in agriculture production is very, very low. We're talking about actually what we call broken value chains. And therefore, African countries depend on imports from other countries, which is a source, in a way, of their vulnerability, as has been mentioned in relation to the war in Ukraine, where we can produce actually within Africa and trade amongst ourselves, in addition to trading with the rest of the world. As you know, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is here, but if we do not produce enough, what is it that we're going to put on the market? So African countries, they have been trying to really reverse this undesirable trend in terms of increasing the productivity, addressing the issue of nutrition in a manner that is friendly to the environment, to create jobs for the young people and for the women. So the organizations, including my own, the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, what we have been trying to do is to support the countries to improve productivity, to improve nutrition, and to really make innovation, to innovate more and to collaborate, because the food agenda is a common, a shared agenda. It's not to be left only to the ministries of agriculture. It's a health agenda, it's a finance agenda, it's a job employment agenda, social security agenda, it's an environment agenda. So we have to bring together all the relevant stakeholders, and FAO and other partners have been trying to do this. This is one of the things which we highlighted in the report, working with the African Union and other partners like WFP, UNECA, to really support the efforts of countries along the national transformation pathways.